Hear ye. It is our honor to welcome you to the KingMaker Podcast.
Welcome back to the KingMaker Podcast. I know it's been way too long, been in hibernation, trying to stay away from crypto Twitter and everything going on in the bear market, which probably is the wrong thing to do, but life is always busy. We have an amazing guest today. Formerly, maybe they still are, but formerly they were the world's preeminent bribologists when it came to convex. And now they're sort of infamous, maybe, sort of the center of melodramas, or might I say velodramas here across the crypto Twitter sphere. Of course, I'm talking about Alex. We are going to make it Alex, and it's so great to have you back. You were actually on the very first KingMaker podcast, and now you are here to enlighten us in all the new things you've been up to. So, welcome to the show. Alejandro, I think he'll be here in a little bit. This is Keith. We're looking to catch up. What's been going on, Alex?
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind intro. We were talking a little before we got started here, but I think you gave me my first official title in crypto in being the preeminent bribologist. And yeah, I was so lucky to be a part of your all's initial launch. I think we had 25 people on that first space, and it's been amazing to watch all of y'all's growth ever since then. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to come back and chat with y'all. And look at this, we got a fancy new Riverside setup here, really upscaled. Fancy operation
That's
we
right.
got now.
When you think KingMaker, you think upscale. All right, so let's talk. Let's start a little bit on the personal side of things. Just watching your growth, your trajectory in crypto. When we first met, I think you had a full-time job, and now you're full-time in crypto. Can you talk a little bit about that transition? Because I know, we are in a bear, but things will change, and people will be looking for podcasts to listen and catch up on information. But people will also in the future be looking to make that jump between their day-to-day job into the fun and amazing roller coaster of crypto. So can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we want to go all the way back, I definitely started to get interested in crypto, like a lot of people, during the pandemic. For a number of years, I had very, very smart friends of mine who, told me that, crypto was the future. I needed to get my head into this. They thought it'd be a natural fit, just given my interest in technology and government and finance, that this is the intersection of all those things. But I didn't really have my head wrapped around it, right? It just seemed like magic internet money to me. But I built a gaming PC during the pandemic because, what else were we going to do other than maybe stay in and play some video games while the world fell apart. And once I did that, I got my fancy new video card. I finally took a friend of mine's advice, and I'm like, well, I guess when I'm not using this, I could let this thing, mine some Bitcoins for me. So went through that process, got the rig mining, started to watch, this little number on the screen go from $0 to a few dollars to a few more dollars. And then it was a few $100s, and then it was a few $1,000s. And I'm just going, okay, well, this seems kind of interesting. Now, what can I go and do with this internet money that I had made, right? And that was kind of during the the DeFi, summer sort of moment. And so, let's take some of those Bitcoins and let's bring them into a product that allows me to swap them. Okay, well, now I've got Ethereum as well. Now, what do I do with this Ethereum? Well, you can deposit it in these different sort of protocols and you can earn off of it. You can become a liquidity provider and earn an APR. You can loan your, tokens. You can swap them to something super degen and stake them and play these kind of like games that people do. And I just, fell deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. And of course, very quickly, I wasn't satisfied with my tiny little pile that I had mined, right? I wanted to bring more and more of my money into the ecosystem. But slowly, just by playing around, experimenting, I just became, increasingly, convinced that this was indeed, the future, that there was indeed like true innovation happening in the space, that sort of cutting out all these middle layers of banks and financial institutions was a really, really valuable thing. And, that's the thing that allows us to produce more yield with these sort of tokens. And so it sort of
So real,
spiraled
real
from there.
quick,
Yeah.
yeah. So real quick, so what was the time frame from starting going down the rabbit hole to fully falling down it? Was this over the course of maybe 6 months or so, or what was that journey like for you from a length of time?
Yeah, it's hard because these are pandemic months that we're measuring. And I think all of us entered that sort of time warp where it didn't really make sense. But uh, anybody who follows, I guess, computer graphics, I picked up a NVIDIA 3 series card. So I think it's probably like fall or winter, somewhere in there. And that was when I think I started on the journey of initially mining. And then it took a little while, right? Because initially that didn't really mean anything to me other than, oh, this is kind of interesting. We'll see how it goes. But I'd say, it's probably over the course of about a year. It's probably took me a year before like I was starting to like go all in, right? And I was like increasingly obsessed. Dipped my toes in and then found myself very quickly falling face first into the pool.
Excellent. And you do go by the moniker "We Are Gonna Make It." So is it true that you wrote that song for Zuckerberg's sister?
How dare you slander me in
Originally,
such a
when
way?
I
I
met
thought we were
you,
friends here.
originally I saw that you were a producer, so I'm just trying to connect the dots here.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually pretty funny when I first met my partner on Bumble. I had my profession listed as producer, and she was like, "Who is this guy? Is he some sort of music producer, like rap producer? Like what does that really mean?" I had to explain that no, it's in the marketing and agency world, means something very different. I am not that cool, but thankfully that means I can safely say I had nothing to do with that market tanking Wagme music video. Good
Darn it.
riddance.
Okay. All right. Fine. We'll let you off the hook this time. All right. So fast forwarding, you've spent a year falling down the rabbit hole. You end up in Convex, and we sort of cross paths. Seeing you making some posts on crypto Twitter, talking about bribes and the exciting world of Curve and Convex. What was your journey into that, and then ultimately the pivot to where you are now? So, but first, let's talk a little bit about the Convex piece. How'd you find
Yeah.
that, and what did that look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, as anybody who has gone deep into this world, in particular DeFi, I think you know that it takes a lot to feel like you've truly understood, a complex protocol, the ecosystem it supports, all the different facets of it. There's so much going on in the space that the number of maybe like areas that you can truly develop some degree of like deeper vertical knowledge or expertise is going to be limited. So one of my friends who got me really into the space and, the Discord community of just friends that he had that sort of pulled me in, right, and helped radicalize me. They were all very, very interested in curve and convex, in particular, as this sort of bribe wars were beginning, right, and the whole curve wars narrative was beginning to spin up, and so I just wanted to learn everything that I could about curve, convex, Vodium before I sort of went through the process of, getting myself, deeply invested in it. And at the time, I found just one of the best ways for like me to learn was to, read and consume as much content as I could to wrap my head around it. And then to try my best as sort of a test of like, did I actually understand this? To re-articulate, what I learned in the form of sort of like threads on Twitter. It was almost a way of like learning out loud, right? If I'm enough of an idiot that I've been able to wrap my head around it, maybe I will be able to explain it in such a way that somebody else will benefit from it. Or of course, if I haven't properly understood it, somebody on Twitter is gonna, call me out and show me where I got things wrong. So I started writing threads and got really engaged in that world. And then of course, I think where you and I initially crossed paths was that I think there was that big narrative around, the curve wars and bribes and sort of all this stuff. And there was a moment where, all of the numbers associated with that, it was like only up, right? And the price of those tokens exploded and bribes exploded. And then there was all this sort of like confusion and FUD in the space as the market generally like began to falter, right? And like a counter narrative developed after some of those boom times of, oh my gosh, bribes are collapsing, right? The flywheel doesn't work.
Right, right.
This was all bullshit. And I just, and sort of looking at these things closely, I'm like, well, is that true? Let me go through my exercise, right? And I spun up this spreadsheet, pulling everything I could off of, the Llama Air Force website and their Discord, sort of tracking bribes. And just generally what I found was that as long as you were introducing some sort of control into your measurement, like say the price of ETH, or if you were looking at number of tokens bribed or things like that, that the flywheel looked perfectly healthy, right? And that the things that we were seeing in these giant fluctuations in sort of like bribe value just had to do with the shifts in the market. And so, I think I got some attention at that moment because that was something I was paying very close attention to. And I would post my spreadsheets and say like, yeah, man, bribes are down 25%, but so is the market. Look at this past week, 3 new protocols are bribing. They're all bribing the same amount of tokens.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
so just bringing a little rationality into what was kind of an insane, fevered debate at that time, I guess.
It was all about market cap, and people weren't seeing it. They were looking at the USD, and yeah, it was great that you brought that clarity to the market. And thus, when we had our first episode, it was a Bribecast live. We did a Spaces and wanted you to break that down to get that information and that narrative out there versus, the world's falling apart. And since then, the world has fallen apart. But if you look at a market cap standpoint, that's the perspective because things will come back. Everything is cyclical.
Yeah, exactly. And it's certainly, I don't follow sort of the day-to-day or week-to-week, shifts in the curve and convex world like I once did because I'm quite focused elsewhere now. But you continue to see, plenty of protocols, Frax in particular, building on top of curve, building on top of convex, continuing to bribe at healthy levels. And No. Does it feel like boom times? No, because the chart isn't up only, and the bribe tokens are not up only, but it doesn't look like there's been systematic collapse either, right? I think everybody right now is just in that bear market build phase, and so you need to look for other kinds of signals if you're trying to determine whether or not uh, the product, right, the ecosystem is working.
So you just mentioned build phase. It really does feel like that. Now's the time for people to build their base. It's time for maybe protocols that were strictly based on hopes and dreams to maybe go away. Those with real yield and the I don't know, the ability to sustain good times and bad times are here for the long term. Any favorite protocols you might have that you would want to talk about?
In terms of just generally speaking, what I'm looking at broadly, or
That was your cue to talk about, who you work for. But
oh,
hey,
I
a
see,
little
I
too
see. There,
subtle, I guess. I'm sorry that I didn't tee that up. Well, I thought it was,
well,
spectacular tee up, but
that's just going back to me being the big dum dum, not picking up on the subcontext. Yes, happy to dive in there. So, I mean, it kind of picks up in the story in an interesting place of my journey, because obviously in looking at the curve model, right, and they very much pioneered the sort of VE model. I was, of course, very interested when Andre Cronje announced his sort of solidly DEX that was going to launch on Phantom. And I was far from the only one. That might have been the last big like crypto Twitter narrative hurrah, where everybody was just focused on one major event happening in DeFi. But from his initial sort of blog post to everything that sort of came, all of the chaos and confusion, I just got very deep into that because I understood Curve and Convex well enough to understand, how he was sort of taking the model that they built there. Also taking some things from UniV3, UniV2, and trying to roll them all into a DEX that did some things a little bit different. So I was fascinated, right? And likewise, I just started sort of writing threads about that, trying to understand, what it was and how it was going to play out. I also got involved in, some of that early farming over there that was just incredibly lucrative for a large period of time. DeFi summer like yields, and that got me pulled into initially VDAO, and VDAO was a DAO that had basically dedicated itself to trying to win a portion of the initial control of Solidly, because Andre gave out 100% of the initial protocol control to the top protocols on Phantom, as ranked by TVL. And the VDAO folks basically said, well, let's spin up a DAO. Let's attract a bunch of TVL in the form of like a sort of farm, right? Let's give everybody a token by virtue of them depositing in there. That token will become a governance token that can sort of control the DAO, which owns a portion of the protocol, and thus it gives ordinary folks an opportunity to participate in the launch of this new protocol, not just the existing protocols that were getting a portion of it. So I got pulled into VDAO, just
Real
started
quick,
with like, yeah,
what's the timeline? I mean, this feels like years ago, but was this like only like 6 months ago? Like, how long ago was
this is
this?
January, February, March, I think was like the lead up to the Solidly launch. If I
It
if
feels
I
like a
remember
lifetime ago.
correctly.
That's
Oh, it
so
does.
crazy. All right,
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
to
So
sorry to interrupt there.
no, it's a good frame because it has gone it's gone by very quickly. Um, but yeah, in helping out with VDAO, I think I always like to say this for anybody who's, interested in getting more involved in the space. I had no particular objective in mind. I just, I was writing these threads, and then I was asked to help out a little with the DAO. So I started helping out, and then it was like, hey man, can you plug in on the multi-sig for a little bit? It's like, sure. And it's like, hey, you want to stay on the multi-sig? Sure. Hey, you're doing even more. You think you're kind of on the core team now? I was like, rad, right? And so it just sort of spiraled from there. But it meant I had a front row seat for both the rise and the fall of Solidly. And it brought me very close to some very, very smart people, strategists, developers who, as we sort of watched the Solidly story play out, began to develop an idea that we think we know what worked very well with Solidly, and we think we know the components that were broken. That it was not what maybe crypto Twitter thought initially was, which was just a complete failure. It was just something that needed a few things tweaked. It needed some bugs fixed. It needed some certain incentives fixed, and it needed an opportunity to basically be given a true shot to see if the next gen AMM that Andre believed that he was building actually worked. And so that's when we sort of started working on Velodrome.
So it just felt like you needed a little positivity at the end here. I'd say even a little optimism, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you got it. I mean, so like to set up the picture a little bit, Andre had imagined Solidly as an ecosystem public good for the Phantom ecosystem. That's why he distributed 100% of the initial control of the protocol to the existing protocols on the Phantom ecosystem. So it was designed to be that base liquidity layer, right? Extremely low fees for swaps. I believe on Solidly it was 0.01%. So those would be some of the lowest fees in the game. But that all the value produced by the protocol flows back to those lockers. So flows back to the ecosystem, those protocol partners, all fees, all bribes. And so while the Phantom ecosystem, what we saw very much sort of rejected the model, and in part, some of that rejection was probably born of the failures of the initial launch. But also, I think Phantom was maybe a uniquely PvP kind of space, and also a space that probably had as many dexes already as it had protocols actually, building products. We saw an opportunity for having that sort of public good, that base liquidity layer on an ecosystem that had a more cooperative mindset and was in a growth phase, or was about to enter a growth phase, versus one that I think had maybe already played out its cycle and was about to begin declining. So that's when we got introduced to the folks over at Optimism. The folks at Optimism described the biggest barrier that they had to growth on their ecosystem. The thing that they heard the most from all of the projects already building over there was the ability to attract and retain deep liquidity at a low cost. So it's kind of a match made in heaven. Like, we've got a product that is designed to do that. They
Right.
have a need and an interest in bringing it there. And so we started working together at that point.
So how did that connection actually happen? Like, was there a couple key individuals? Were you at the heart of that? Who reached out to who, and how did that connection happen?
Yeah, at that point, before I think the nail was really in the coffin on Solidly, but it was easy, especially for anybody close enough to it, to sort of know what the problems were, to see what was coming. We were getting a ton of outreach from both new chains as well as from folks who were interested in basically forking Solidly, right? And we would always have those conversations. And what we mostly found is that most people were interested in doing a real quick fork, not really fixing anything fundamental about what made the protocol not work, so that they could have their big TVL boom. And maybe they didn't care quite as much about the bust. So we talked to a lot of people. The introduction to Optimism came through a member of VDAO, who was also a member of Information Token. I don't know how he met those guys, but he was a conference jumper, so could have just been one of those serendipitous connections that can happen at a crypto conference. But he said, we should connect, we should talk about this, and we just found in that conversation that they shared our interest in doing it right, that they had no interest in sort of a fast fork or an unsustainable sort of emissions boom. They didn't want to see solidly repeated on their ecosystem. They wanted to build something really great, and that the overall ethos of the ecosystem, what they were about to embark on with the launch of their own token and their decentralized governance, and like all the kind words that like Vitalik and others have directed towards them. We thought they seemed like an ideal partner. And frankly, I think we saw ETH L2s as the future. It seemed just clear as day to us that the Alt L1 narrative had been destroyed. If you weren't convinced, before Luna and the collapse of all these Alt L1s, I think it was pretty clear afterwards. So we knew that was the place that we wanted to devote that energy. And, we just started really vibing with the team and kicking around ideas. And it only really became formal pretty late, which is they gave us, I think, about $150K to bootstrap some initial expenses, which in the world of crypto for the design and launch of a new protocol is almost nothing, but we were happy to do it. And that got the ball rolling, right? And eventually they were able to disclose to us what we already suspected, which is they would have a token launching soon. And then we really accelerated our launch schedule to try to align with the launch of their token so we could be the primary liquidity source for Optimism, for the OP token on the Optimism network.
Yeah, what a perfect match with the timing of everything that was going on at Optimism. I'm sure Cardano and Solana were a close second and third to build on.
Oh yeah, if they had just reached out, would have been great. Match made in heaven, I'm sure.
But yeah, what great timing with Optimism. There was rumors of the token launch, and you're right. To launch a token, you need liquidity, and having this protocol ready, tailor made for that. Awesome. So take us forward. And Alejandro is joining us now. And
hello, sir.
Hello, Alejandro.
Hello, sir. Sorry for arriving late. Hopefully I haven't missed too much. It's nice to hear you again, Alex.
So just catching you up, Alejandro, we're up to the moment basically of Optimism dropping a token and Velo being there, ready to rock and roll. So perfect timing. We're about to get to good stuff on the story, and then we're going to fire away a few questions to learn more about what Alex is up to in the present. So take us forward, Alex. What has it been since that launch and from building on the protocol or building on Optimism, and what's it looking like now?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I'll set up a few things. So maybe just for anybody who's not familiar with the sort of details of the Solidly model, and maybe especially because I think your viewership is probably very familiar with the curve and convex model, can talk a little bit about what some of the design of the protocol looked like, and how that sort of played out in launch. So a few of the big ways I think you can think about it is that Solidly and thus Velodrome combine some of the best elements of the curve model, the convex model, and the UniV2 model all into one single AMM. So you have that ability to do stable swaps. You have the ability to do volatile swaps. Emissions are controlled by VE/VLO lockers. So just like Curve, you can lock your token up for a 4-year period and use that voting power to basically choose which pools get emissions. But one big change or adjustment Andre made to the model was that rather than, like on Curve, having the trading fees being distributed 50-50 between liquidity providers and stakers, he adjusted the model so that all of the trading fees go to VE/VLO lockers, or VE solid lockers at that time. And his intention with this was basically to try to better align incentives, because what we see sometimes on Curve is the risk of basically incentivizing passive liquidity, right? That voters may vote for pools that do not actually produce high volume or high trading fees. So by virtue of directing all the fees just to the voters, you're incentivizing those voters to vote for the basically most efficient, most profitable pools. Fees are basically creating, and this is how Andre titled it, right, in the code, internal bribes. They're becoming self-bribe pools. And that's different than Curve, where that fee revenue is just being distributed equally across all stakers. So you might have a protocol right now that is voting for a pool on Curve that's, just producing stupid amounts of fee revenue, but you don't benefit from that any more or less than somebody who's voting for a pool that, does almost no volume whatsoever. All of that revenue, right, is being split equally. So that was like one big shift or change they made.
Brilliant addition by Andre.
Yeah, it was very, very interesting. And then another thing, of course, is that because of the way in which, Curve and then Convex and then, like Vodium and Union and all this stuff were built in a very progressive way, right? It was built over time. He was able to integrate from the beginning, bribing directly into the product. So you don't have a secondary layer that you need to go to in order to bribe or conduct bribes. You do all of that directly within the system, which keeps all that value accrual within the system. Because I think, as listeners here will know, each additional layer you add, you're basically sort of skimming another bit of like value off, right? Convex, I think something around 17% that they take and redistribute in certain ways. They make up for it, of course, in having that secondary token, the CVX token, as a part of that. Vodium and Union also take their fees. I think their fees are very reasonable, to be clear. That's still where all of my tokens are sitting, is in Vodium and Union. But because we were basically starting from a point of zero, right, we're able to basically build this all into a single product and not need sort of that additional layer that can potentially extract value a little bit differently. So that was another one of like the beautiful pieces.
Yeah. So it seems like you've really got the spirit of what Andre was trying to create here, and like you said, you've made certain tweaks. Have you all been in any communication with him directly? Talking more about his vision, or as you have made the upgrades?
No, we have not. We've had plenty of people, right? Because many of our partners, like Synthetics, they're crypto OGs. It's a small community. They all know each other, and these partners are like, "Hey, you guys should reach out to Andre. You should chat a bit about what you're doing." And we just haven't. What I will say, though, is that in the VDAO days, when we were still functioning a sub DAO of the Solidly ecosystem, some of our members were very much in continuous contact with Andre. They even pointed out to Andre early on that they thought some of these issues, the issues we ended up correcting, or I should say at least the things that we believed were issues, pointed them out to him before launch. And he chose to either ignore or he didn't believe them to be issues. So I would say in the solidly days we were in touch with him. Since he decided to sort of peace out on crypto, I think we've respected respected that. So we haven't been in contact with him, but we had some very big brained folks. Some of them who were the folks who were chatting with Andre through the whole launch, who helped inform some of the shifts in design we made. Like we changed the emissions structure to be something that was much more sustainable in our mind. We changed the initial distribution. We thought the 100% distribution to existing protocols did not go as planned. We removed downvoting. We adjusted the fee structure a bit. All things that we thought overall dialed in the design of a product that Andre described as like a pretty alpha product. I'm sure if Andre had stuck around, he would have iterated on it in his own
Right.
ways as well.
Right. So if there's one thing you could tell Andre today, because I know he's an avid listener of Kingmaker Pod, what would you tell him?
I don't know, man. I would never presume to tell Andre anything. I hope he's enjoying his time away. I hope one day that I'm successful enough in the space that I can peace out, kick up my feet, touch some grass too.
So there you go. That's what we want to tell Andres. Keep touching grass. Enjoy what you've done.
No, he's absolute legend in the space. And one thing I wanted to say is that I really like that you guys go and you got, I don't know if forking is the right word, but you forked it, but then you made it into I like that you guys put your own touch. You did you made it your own, and that's one thing that I think a lot of people also appreciate, because you have changed the protocol quite a bit from what he originally created. So that's
Yeah.
no, yeah, that's one thing I just wanted to say, that because a lot of protocols nowadays they fork a protocol and then it's basically the same thing, just different like design or maybe a different logo, but everything else is the same thing.
Avalanche.
Yeah.
Everything avalanche.
Yeah. Yeah,
No, yeah,
and a lot of Phantom, the world we came from too. I mean, so many of the
That's right.
protocols
Yeah.
there were, forks of Ethereum products that, over time, I think took on their own character. They put their own twists on things. But yeah, I mean, the at the base level, right? Sort of the core fundamental principles of the protocol are the same. And if you go back and read like Andre's first Medium post describing solidly, he sort of outlines, almost a core set of requirements, right? This is what this protocol is going to do, and this is how it's going to be, different than anything out there. And I think even with the tweaks we've made, we meet all of those requirements. We have just designed a system that we think better delivers on those requirements, right? Having the fortune of being able to rebuild it, having learned from the initial launch. And I suppose we could say not even just the initial launch, but the forks that, many of whom we at least chatted with folks who launched it again with the exact same design decisions. And I think you can see how that's played out. That I think right now we're sort of carrying the mantle of the solidly model forward, and a lot of the folks who maybe rushed out didn't sort of take the consideration to sort of fix some of the things that were maybe unoptimized, have kind of faded in the rear view mirror a bit.
Meaning Alejandro and I couldn't even name any of those forks.
Yeah, exactly.
to be fair, I haven't been paying attention to layer twos as of late. But one thing I wanted to bring up really quick, I don't know if anyone's told you, but I see that you guys work really closely with synthetics,
Mm-hmm.
and other protocols. How did that happen?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, in launching on Optimism, of course, an element, part of the spirit of the initial distribution that we maintain from Solidly is that the top protocols on the ecosystem should get an initial share of protocol control, right? So we distributed VE NFTs that represent a core portion. I guess it was 1% of initial control of the protocol to those top protocols. And I believe, at that point, Synthetics was the top protocol on Optimism by TVL. And Synthetics is, of course, like one of Optimism's original partners. They've been, very much a part of shaping that network. And, their vision is very much to, I think, move and drive and continue to build on Optimism and layer 2. And they have a whole ecosystem of protocols that are built on Synthetics sort of infrastructure there. So, of course, like right away, we wanted to get them a VE NFT. We wanted to get them invested in the protocol. But like any, new kid on the block, I think all of the existing protocols initially sort of looked at us like, hey, well, thank you so much for the gift, and we'll see how it goes, and we'll figure out if there's more to be done here, but you kind of got to prove yourself first. And so really that like first VE NFT was just our introduction, was a way to get the conversation going with them. But over the subsequent months, we have developed a close relationship with them. And I actually think there's kind of an interesting thing to think about, which is that, the rumor was, right, of course, that Andre was building this thing to support kind of like a Forex sort of super platform that would have been built on some degree of, high volume running through synthetic assets on Solidly. And so we saw immediately, some degree of potential product market fit in that, like, this is in some ways supporting an ecosystem of synthetic assets, what Solidly was designed to do. But also we saw that, as a protocol, Synthetics was significantly overpaying for their liquidity on layer 2. It was not only much lower than on layer 1, but the cost in convex bribes at that time and some direct incentives, they were just paying, sort of way too much for what they were getting. And so we just continuously sort of made that case to them. Come give us a try. Your voting power already gives you the ability to, of course, direct emissions to pools of your choice. And we saw liquidity growing on pairs like synthetic ETH and SUSD already, but like lean in a little bit more. We know you're spending to build this. Spend a little more with us so we can sort of prove our ROI. Within the last few months, they've gotten very deeply involved, right, and are now shifting a lot of their sort of incentives to Velodrome. And we're watching the success of that.
So where is Velodrome right now? And talk to us a little bit about where y'all are going.
Yeah. So I mean, right now I would definitely describe this as Optimism's top DEX, and depending on what metric you're looking at, that might that picture might look slightly different. We've at times been in the top spot in terms of TVL. We've been in the top spot in terms of volume. At times, maybe second or third in either of those metrics. But I think the core thing to look at is that the vast majority of the market share for ecosystem tokens lives on Velodrome, that the capital efficiency of protocol incentives remains the highest in the ecosystem on Velodrome. We've reduced basically the cost of liquidity by 1 to 2 times on Velodrome, and that the majority of the volume for those critical ecosystem pairs like SUSD and SETH continues to flow through us. And so, we feel very, very lucky to have been as successful as we have been. And really for us, I think there are two things that we're focused on. One is, of course, continuing that success. And that comes both in the form of getting deeper engagement from the protocols that already exist on Optimism. We've gotten most of the protocol incentives shifted to Velodrome. There are still some that are going into Arrakis, basically, and via Arrakis, going to Uni v3, but they're overpaying anybody who's doing that. So we're trying to sort of chip away at that and get more
So
folks
don't do
invested
that.
in Velodrome. Don't do that. But the other thing is that we also want to be the front door for new protocols onboarding to the ecosystem, because as a public good, our flywheel is very, very sustainable as long as there is robust economic activity happening on the Optimism ecosystem. And that sort of economic activity requires a robust and thriving ecosystem of all the different like DeFi and crypto Legos and users and transactions and volume and all that sort of stuff. And so to date, we've onboarded about 31 new protocols, I believe, to the ecosystem. We've got a ton still coming. We just announced, this week that like Lido is going to start to bribe, and that wrapped staked ETH will be arriving, which we expect to be a big move. So I think part of it is just we're doubling down on getting everybody on board and engaged in the flywheel. But the other piece that we're super excited about, I described earlier this idea of the ability to sort of build directly into a sort of single DApp or a single flywheel all of the amazing innovations that we've seen in the Curve and Convex ecosystem. We want to basically bring, what is our Vodium and Union directly to Velodrome, which would allow basically somebody to take their VE NFT position. And if you're not familiar with the VE NFT, think about VE Curve, but instead of that, those tokens being sort of locked in a contract, those tokens are locked in an NFT. And that NFT is something that's tradable. So this is another one of Andre's innovations. You can't trade your VE CRV position. You can take your 4-year VE Velo lock and list it or trade it to somebody as you see fit. So it's a bit more liquid in that way. But we want somebody to be able to take their VE NFT to have the ability to delegate it, delegate that voting power. And what we're going to build is basically the ability for them to delegate it to something that we're calling Relay. And what Relay will do is, much like Vodium, Relay will optimize the votes of that individual to basically return the best value in terms of fees and bribes. And so, for instance, right now on Velodrome, the average voting APRs have ranged, for almost 2 months now, about 200 to 300%. So that's about 10 times what Convex is producing right now if you've got vote locked Convex. But you do have to get in there every week, right? And sort of look at the different pools, look at the bribes, and allocate your votes accordingly. That's a lot of fun, if you're a particularly active DeFi user and you want to be like kind of actively engaged in optimizing, but there's plenty of people who would just rather set it and forget it.
Yes,
they just want
yes.
their bribes. Yep, they want those bribes compounded. They want those bribes earning yield, and they just want the system to sort of work. And so that's sort of the next big feature that we are working on right now is Velodrome Relay, to allow that sort of more automated management of a VE NFT position, just turn it into something that votes optimally, returns those bribes, compounds them as you see fit, and all of that fun stuff. So we're super excited for that.
So you all are like a magnet pulling protocols into Optimism. Is there any view or perspective to grow beyond Optimism onto other layer twos, maybe Arbitrum or other places from Velo's standpoint?
Yeah. We get that question a lot. I would say probably not. And here's our sort of take on it. I mean, we're certainly not closing the door entirely on the possibility, but I think if you look at what Velodrome is designed to do, I think it is in a lot of ways designed to be a ecosystem maximizer. In that all of its incentives align with the incentives of the ecosystem. We will only win if Optimism wins, right? We will only succeed if the protocols on Optimism succeed, and that is really clarifying, I think, for those of us who work on the product, but also gives the product, I think, a very clear value proposition and allows the product to only stay focused on optimizing, the ecosystem. I think you see in Curve right now a struggle with what is actually, I think, a much more difficult thing to execute, to their credit, which is going truly multi-chain. And I think going truly multi-chain means you are serving many different interests. And that makes it harder for you to maybe be as competitively effective within each ecosystem. So for anybody who's used Curve on Optimism, it's not the full Curve experience. You can't lock the E-curve on Optimism. You can't collect your fees on Optimism. It is in some ways just there to swap and LP. And those fees, are taken and sent back to mainnet currently or half of those fees are sent back to mainnet. That is a challenge.
Right.
And likewise, if you are like a Vodium maxi, like we are, I think everybody on this call is, that's not an experience you can have right now on Optimism. Although I did see, it does sound like they're going to potentially deploy some initial functionality, but I think for Curve to really compete in the multi-chain future, it's got to feel just as good using Curve or Convex. There's got to be sort of no barrier to voting, participating in governance, collecting fees on L2 versus L1, on Optimism versus Arbitrum, and that is legitimately a colossal undertaking. And I know it's something that they are working on. But in the meantime, it does give the space to kind of ecosystem maximizers like a Velodrome to provide much of that functionality in a very focused way.
Right. I was really just asking that question to see if Alejandro and I can fork you guys and put you somewhere else.
I mean, you could certainly try.
We'll just fork the code, and then all the fees go back to you. We're just forcing you to go on Arbitrum, basically.
Yeah, there you go.
Nah, messing with you, but nah, that's actually really cool. And you do make a good point that if you go spread to other chain and go truly like multi-chain, you may spread, like, well, the way I see it is it may spread you too thin and is a really big endeavor. So the way I would see it, and if anyone, and you're probably gonna get that question more in the future, like why not Arbitrum? It's just because like you get to focus your efforts on other places, and end of the day, it's up to you and the team to decide where you think your efforts put best, because there's only so much time in the day for you guys to continue on building.
Yeah, and I can tell you, like right now, I mean, our initial theory, right, going into Optimism is that even if we were about to enter a bear market, and boy, I think the week we launched was one of the worst, crypto had seen in a while. It was when the bottom really fell out of things. So we truly launched in the most bear moments. But even if that's the environment that we're going into, we believe crypto has a future. So there are going to be people building, right? And there will be capital that exists in the system. But then the question becomes, where is that capital? Where is that activity going to concentrate? And while the overall, chart, of crypto TVL or crypto activity, maybe it's going down, 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 right? As we've unfortunately seen in many ways. But where is that activity happening? Is it all concentrating in certain places? Because if you are where it is concentrating, if you are where it is growing, then it doesn't feel like a bear market to you. And that is, I think, what we've been experiencing on Optimism. I mean, right now we couldn't expand anywhere if we tried because we cannot keep up with the number of protocols that we are helping to onboard to the ecosystem. 31 in a few months is kind of insane. And, we've got dozens more and new folks reaching out every day that we're onboarding while we're also trying to, improve the product and build this new functionality and everything else. Maybe eventually there will be a day here where we don't feel like our plates are already like double full, and we can step back and think, okay, well, where do we go from here? But for now, we're like, boy, the table is sort of set out in front of us, and we got to keep up with basically the demand that we have for deep liquidity on Optimism, and onboard another 30 protocols.
So I just have my normal sort of standard wrap-up question, but Alejandro, do you have any final questions for Alex? And I don't want to go too long today because I definitely want to catch up again, and continue to keep the conversation going.
Honestly, I don't know if you covered it before, but I'm just curious. So, Alex, is there anything besides Velodrome that you're working on that you'd like to tell to the podcast if you haven't already? As I came late, maybe I missed it. Or is Velodrome is specifically what you're focusing on right now?
Man, I wish I could, have the time and space to focus on anything else. It's actually kind of funny because, before I started working on Velodrome, I used to actually really like having sort of the breadth of different things that I was into just as a participant in the ecosystem, right? I could follow when a new chain was launching or a new project was launching, and oh boy, am I going to throw some money into staking here? Am I going to try to ride this launch? Am I going to play around with this new protocol, learn all I can about it, right? And I have not been able to do any of that, right? And like I've got friends who are like, "Oh my God, are you checking out this thing or that thing?" Or, "Oh my God, I made so much money," or "Look at these APRs," and I'm missing all of it, to be honest. Like I'm a shit crypto investor now. I'm a shit degen yield farmer because I'm
Making 200 to
just laser
300%
focused.
APR. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it does help
Struggling to get by.
Yeah, it does help that the one thing I'm focused on right now, I think, is currently delivering some of the best yields in all of crypto. Although I do not think it's truly being noticed because I think everybody's still talking about GMX or whatever. But that doesn't hurt. But part of the excitement of the space at one point was just following the mass, right? As any new cool thing popped up. But no, I'm totally focused on Velodrome, but I also feel very lucky. It's funny because obviously I quit my job. I left the old world behind to do all of this sort of stuff, and people from that world will ask me, "Hey man, like how's it going? How's the new gig?" But it doesn't feel right. It almost doesn't feel like describing it like work, even though it is functionally my job, I guess. Now I do collect a salary, because it's so much more dynamic. Like I truly love the people that I work with. It's so much fun. I work a little bit all the time, but it doesn't feel intrusive in the way that, when work used to bleed into evenings or weekends or stuff like that, you'd be like, fuck off, right? Now it's just like, well, this is what I would be doing anyways, right? This is fun. This is a hobby that's paying me. How weird is that? So yeah, I feel very lucky to have this be my sole focus. I've got no idea where it's going to go, in the long term. Eventually, Velodrome should be a pretty much permissionless, autonomous protocol that doesn't require, anybody sort of working on it, maybe just checking in on the front end every now and then, or, sort of stuff like that. But we've got a long road between here and there.
So that's the grass touching phase when you guys get there.
Yeah, you got it.
I was seeing a tweet you were putting out. I'm so lucky to get to work with at Jack something or other every day. I almost responded with get a room, but yeah, it looks like you are enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah, it's cool because these guys I get to work with, right? And I'll name some names. Guy with keyboard is one. We've got Tao is another. Jack Anorak, Zoomer, Stas, plenty of others. We just sort of came together, working together in the VDAO days, right? And some people came on a little bit later. And there was almost not even like a moment. At some point, I had to check with people. It's like, you're good to do this full time here on out. Like we're gonna set our budgets. But it was more just like a bunch of guys hanging out, talking about this stuff. Who, before we knew it, we were building a protocol, and before we knew it, that protocol was enjoying a ton of success. And we all come from different backgrounds. Some are devs. Some have backgrounds in economics and finance, and in academics and consulting, and
rap producers.
There we have former potential, music producers, but we make one hell of a team, and that is easily the best part, because I think everybody knows that you can have the best job in the world, but if the people you work with, if you don't vibe, doesn't matter. It's going to be hell. And likewise, you can have a really, really hard job, but if the people you're working for and with are amazing, you might find yourself really loving it. And so lucky for me, I have both sides of that equation right now. I love what I'm doing, and I love who I'm doing it with.
So it's 2025. Everything's gone perfect. What does Velodrome look like in that world?
That's a great question. Let's talk a little bit about this. I think the vision, right, for crypto is that there is so many more mainstream products, financial and otherwise, that those products are built on top of very capable, scalable networks like Ethereum layer 2s. That those products, by virtue of being more mass market, bring a ton of users and economic activity. So let's just imagine there are, billions of dollars every day flowing through Optimism. And Velodrome, at that point, is a permissionless liquidity base layer where new projects onboarding, existing projects building, they use that base layer as their infrastructure to support liquidity, which is, of course, essential to economic activity. And without needing any sort of outside intervention, Andre, in his initial article, said, without the need to ever have a Zoom call, right? Folks are able to bootstrap new projects, to incentivize liquidity, to grow their work. And by virtue of owning a piece, or it's not really owning a piece, by virtue of you having locked VE-VELO, right? Being able to direct a portion of that voting power, basically being able to direct a portion of core infrastructure for a growing ecosystem, you should just be able to sort of kick back on that, watch the fee and bribe rewards roll in, and let the system work. And have been grateful that you were early and you got your piece of that. And so yeah, that's hopefully me out on a desert island while Velodrome does its thing.
Island?
And
you want a desert island?
Out
You
of
know, like the
everything you could
cool.
say, like at least tropical.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I'm
Yeah,
sure
tropical,
you
all
is
saw
right,
not
the
all right.
desert,
coconut.
dude. You're gonna be talking to like a
Yeah.
volleyball or something.
It sounds very relaxing, peaceful, away from it all. But no, yeah, I'll take tropical.
Okay,
Managing a
good.
bar on a tropical island. I
Ooh,
don't know what
okay.
your guys' plans are.
Well, I guess we're gonna be sitting in there with you.
That sounds great. You're welcome anytime. Drinks on me.
Awesome. I'll hold you to it. Well,
You can.
Alex, thank you for catching up with us. And again, what what a great opportunity to sit on the sidelines and connect with you early on, have you on our first podcast, and then see where you are today. So, congratulations and best of luck as we move into the future. And looking forward to linking up with you more, keep the conversation going, and hear more updates over the course of time. So appreciate your time today. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me on, and congratulations back at you both for all the success.
KingMaker Podcast.